Hi, welcome to Infodumpies. My name's Brianne. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, my pronouns are she, her, and I've already recorded this introduction once already, but because I have unmedicated ADHD, I used the wrong microphone, so this is take 2. It's a solo dump today, so there's no Violet, and we're going to be talking about a topic having to do with autism and ADHD. And rather than be something more, I guess my other ones felt more informational. It's all informational, but this is more from lived experience and less stuff I went to go research, if that makes sense. So, when you first realize you're autistic or you are first diagnosed and you are a late recognized person, it kind of feels like you've just been given this answer and now you have to figure out what to do with it. And people encourage you to start accommodating for yourself, but that's not easy because when you're late recognized, you have been ignoring things your body and your nervous system actually need and like and dislike so much that to figure out, what sensory things do I enjoy? What sensory things bother me a lot? It's a tall order because it's kind of like someone who's living with chronic pain where the normal amount of pain is 0, but if you are feeling some of that all the time, it's hard to know when you're pushing it too far because you're so used to having to push through it, So I thought for this episode, I would talk about some of the things I tried early on that I found really helpful, or some of the things I learned about later that I thought, damn, I wish I would have tried this sooner. Just directions that if you are someone who is newly recognized and you're trying to figure out what the fuck to do with that information, maybe some of this will be helpful. I feel like on the internet, a lot of the times the recommendations are just like spend time stimming, take sensory breaks, and that is all very good, but a lot of that is not actionable or accessible when you are a late recognized person and you are probably discouraged or even punished for a lot of those behaviors. And if you don't know what you like or even can really say like, hey, does that sensory thing feel okay? That's hard to do. So I hope some of the things I covered today are helpful. So the first one sounds pretty easy, but for some of us, it's harder than others. And that is getting yourself some chunks of alone time. So one of the defining early features of autism that people noticed that influenced the term autism was their perception of how autistic people often retreat into ourselves and exist in our own world. And there are several languages where the word for autism is something related to living in one's own world. And there's also the theory of monotropism that says that our most restful state is getting to focus intently on one thing that piques our interest, and that narrow focus is our natural state of attention. And I think alone time really helped me because 1, I had time where I wasn't being perceived, and 2, I got to kind of recalibrate what comfortable felt like because I was so used to being uncomfortable for so long. And I think for a lot of us, there's a lot of guilt around alone time. Like I was that teenager who, when I came out of my room, the family would be like, oh, look who decided to come see us. Oh, she comes down from her room. And of course that made me want to come out of my room less, but spending time by yourself is important. And especially if you are a high masking person, that alone time can provide you some time to not be perceived, because being perceived can be exhausting within itself because you kind of feel like you have to be on. I also think there's something to be said for being interrupted. So interruptions for me pull me out of that monotropic focus where I'm focusing on something I'm really interested in, and they feel like a demand of my attention. And I don't know if anyone's done a study on it, but how an indicator that a kid might be autistic is that they don't really respond when you call for them, and they don't really respond to their name like people say they should be. I feel like I was told so many times, like, what are you doing? You need to pay more attention. What if someone needs to talk to you? Like, I was saying your name. You need to, I think it made me hyper vigilant for expecting someone to need my attention. So I very much can't settle when I feel like someone may be needing to talk to me at some point. So in my house, we have sort of an understanding that when I'm saying, like, hey, no office hours right now, the professor is not in, that means that I need to be alone. That's our code for it. That means I will be alone in my room. My phone will be on Do Not Disturb. Please do not interrupt me either in person or on the phone unless it's an emergency and you absolutely need me. This is the nice way I essentially get to tell my family, hey, can you please leave me the fuck alone a little bit? And no one gets upset. So at our old house, I used to have a visual indicator that the professor needed to be in her office. And it was this little string of bells that Violet had been given at Ren Fair that I had tacked to the top of the door frame to my room. And I would lower them over in front of the door whenever I needed to not be disturbed. So there was an actual physical noisy barrier they would run into so they wouldn't just open the door thinking that they could come chat with me. But having some predetermined alone time is really helpful, and setting up the expectations for, like, hey, if I need this alone time, I'm not mad at anybody. This is something I need to be regulated. And for a lot of high masking people, even when we're alone, we can feel like there's some audience. Like for me, for a long time, I felt like I couldn't do certain things even when I was home by myself because what if someone caught me? And I never understood. It was like, caught me doing what? Even though I knew, like, being weird was the only word I could come up with for it before I knew it was autism, but I was not even comfortable by myself. So I think trying to find moments of alone time where you could tell your family, like, hey, I am not mad at anyone. This is necessary for me. I think that's a really good first step because, like, we have a limited social battery being autistic, and that includes the people closest to you that you love the dearest. Like, sometimes you need time away from them so you can have better quality time when you do spend it with them and recharge your social battery that might have been emptied from socializing with other people you don't necessarily care about, so that you really can spend good quality time with the people you do care about. Like, this is very boring self-care, but it's still self-care to get some alone time. The other thing that was really helpful, and this is definitely something that will be limited depending on how much space you have at home and kids and pets and all of that, but having a space that is your sensory space. So this does get suggested a lot, and sometimes I feel like when people suggest, like, have a place you can escape to, a sensory escape, it feels like it's made to sell you things. So people will be like, I have this room where I have a bubble tube and a swing and all of that. And all that stuff is great. All of that stuff is fucking sweet. And I would love to hang out in one of those rooms. But that is also not feasible for most people. And, like, it is not a magic room where when you're feeling dysregulated, you'll go in there and then come out and everything will be fine. So the private sensory space thing. So in our house, all three of us have our own bedrooms. We're lucky to have that. And I am in a privileged enough position where I can make my room my own personal sensory haven. Not everyone can do that, but if you can even just find a chair that you can sit in and you can put your noise canceling headphones on or something, maybe an eye mask, cover yourself in a blanket, that can be your sensory space. You don't need to have a lot of space at your disposal. You just need to have some place where you can feel comfortable. And again, people can know that you need to be left alone for a little while to recharge. So finding a space that meets your sensory needs, that was a project for me because I didn't really know what my sensory needs were, and it took some evaluating of my own habits and just time to figure out. But if you can do something like, I know someone whose sensory space involved putting a blanket between the back of the couch and the wall, and then pulling it to make sort of like a tent and putting the rest of the blanket underneath the couch cushion, and just hiding under this little couch and blanket lean-to they made with noise-canceling headphones and an eye mask. I've had people go put things, like clients put blankets and stuff on the floor of a closet and get an extension cord so they had a little light and a phone charger and they could hang out in the closet. I've known someone who got one of those soft, like, portable dog crate things that they kind of pop up and they're just like essentially plastic, right? And they zip up. But someone got one of those, tossed a blanket over the top of it, a sleeping bag on the inside, and hidden one of those. Any way you can find like a smaller place to make a sensory space for yourself, I think that can be helpful, because when everything gets overwhelming and you feel like you're going to have a meltdown or shutdown, it's nice to know that you can have something that takes 1 to 2 steps, like grabbing your headphones and a blanket, and you can just escape and try to chill and regulate and hope that maybe it passes. And if it doesn't, it doesn't, but it's another option. But some things you can do, regardless of whether or not you have your own space to make your own sensory haven, are thinking about the individual senses and which things, when you're overwhelmed, are bothering you the most. So when I'm overwhelmed, I immediately start getting more sensitive to how bright it is. Like, I'm just more aware of it. Sounds bother me, even sounds my own body makes. My clothing can sometimes bother me, even when it wasn't really bothering me before. I start getting a headache when I get overstimulated really easily, and it can lead to full-blown migraines. So for me, my sensory space, it was important that light be more controllable. So I have a bunch of blackout curtains, and I have some smart bulbs where I can change like the color and the how dim it is and stuff like that, so I can create my own comfortable lighting scheme. I also have some glasses to help limit sensory input, so if I can't black out my room, I have some like red and yellow tinted glasses that I can toss on and be in there. I have my noise canceling headphones. I have a playlist of comfortable things that I like listening to set up. And if you've listened to the sensory diet episode, I basically do my reactive sensory diet stuff in my sensory safe space when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and it really helps. And even just having that space to retreat to in itself is helpful. And in the move, that was my number one priority, was that I had my space that was as comfortable as I can make it for my own unique sensory profile as quickly as I possibly could. So is my room as good as the room at my old place yet? No, but am I working on it as best as I can? But even if you don't have your own room, that does not mean you can't have your own sensory retreat. That could be as easy as something that smells nice and a weighted blanket and a stuffed animal you really like that has a good texture. Soft stuff like soft blankets. You can have an eye mask, you can have glasses, you can just hide under a blanket. And I think one of the important things is having the people that you live with understand, hey, when this is happening, I'm doing this for my sensory needs. Please don't disrupt me right now. So I'm pairing this with the alone time because they go together. My next recommendation is to start using sensory accommodations for yourself, even when you feel like you don't need it. And the easiest one to start with is probably some sort of ear protection. There's a really common thing, or it was for a while, on TikTok for people to show how comfortable they were with noise-canceling headphones for the first time after learning they're autistic. So it was very much a trend of video where autistic people put them on for the first time and were like, holy shit, everything feels much better. You wouldn't feel better putting noise-canceling headphones on unless you were being bothered by noise in the first place. You know what I'm saying? So like when people are surprised at how nice it is to put on headphones, that's probably an indicator that you were more uncomfortable than you realized before you put them on. So the normal level of uncomfortable with sound that a person is in their day-to-day life is usually 0. If it sounds uncomfortable, that's jarring and like an interruption to someone's day. But for a lot of us, we're dealing with that just eating dinner with someone who keeps clanking their fork against their plate or uses stoneware dishes and they're trying to cut something. It sounds like the worst thing in the world. Most people aren't having to think about that. So one thing I started doing that I noticed immediately made a lot of things in life easier was just putting my headphones over my ears, not even having the noise canceling on, not having them on at all, just putting them on my head, over my ears, not listening to anything, but doing that more often. Because just the amount of muffling that provides was enough for me to realize that there were certain things like doing dishes that a lot of the reason I avoided it, or it was super difficult, or I felt so exhausted afterwards, was because, like I said, I hate sounds of dishes clanking together. And I didn't consider that I'm hearing that at restaurants, and that's why I can't concentrate and I don't like them. But I'm also hearing those sounds when I do dishes, and I don't know why I never made the connection. But after wearing my headphones consistently, even when I wasn't acutely saying, oof, ouch, my ears, helped me realize that, oh, I was not meeting my sensory needs during things like doing dishes because the kitchen is loud and full of many horrible sounds. Now doing dishes is easier. So try wearing headphones or earbuds or earplugs or whatever you already own. Honestly, I don't think you need to go out and buy a bunch of new stuff to help muffle sound. You can eventually. Like, I own headphones and earbuds and like loops, earplugs, and all of that, but like, you don't need to go buy things all at once. I feel like there's a new autism industrial complex that tells you need to go buy a new thing for all of your accommodation needs. And that can be really daunting when you're first learning you're autistic and you're like, nobody told me there was like school supplies to buy for that. But most of us have even just some free headphones we've gotten with a phone or something. Like, just wear them even when you feel like you don't need them. And you might find that there are certain tasks that are a lot easier to do because you didn't realize how much auditory input you were just kind of trying to power through on a daily basis. And this can go for other sensory stuff too. I ended up like accommodating for myself more as far as getting like deep pressure and clothing and other things as time went on. But that took me getting a lot more in tune to what I'm comfortable with in the first place. And I think the first step that really helped the most was just giving myself some defense against sound, even when I felt like I didn't need it. And now I live most of my life having some sort of ear protection when I am outside of my room most of the time. And I'm not getting migraines as much. I'm much more comfortable. I'm much more able to do things like clean and cook. And I just didn't realize how much I had sensory issues, which is a really common refrain for late diagnosed people because we just assume everyone else is having to power through doing those things too. So headphones, earbuds, earplugs, whatever you happen to already have, try them when you feel like you don't need them. So this next one doesn't sound like an accommodation, but it is. And that is spend time doing hobbies you love, but maybe don't do as often as you wish you did. I mentioned in the sensory diet episode that a lot of the early recommendations I saw were to learn how to stim, like rediscover stims, practice them, and that felt very unnatural to me. But when I evaluated a lot of the hobbies I already had, a lot of them were stimming. It was just socially acceptable stimming that I had latched onto because I was like, oh, dip, like crochet really helps chill me out. This is so nice. And I didn't know why, but it was because it was stimming. So I think look at your hobbies and see what sort of sensory input you might be getting from those and dive into those more. Like my love of the gym, my love of fiber art. And this also includes things that might not be hobbies that are an activity, and it might be things related to special interests. So special interests and spending time with your special interests, that is important for autistic brains. That is highly regulating for us. It helps us process the holistic world through something we understand and really care about, spending time doing those things is really important. So if you have a special interest and you very often we get made to feel guilty for spending time with them. And sometimes for some people, they can get in the way of you living your everyday life. So this is not to diminish where you're like, hey, I got so loaded with Star Trek merch that I got into credit card debt or something. That did not happen to me. I want to be clear. The Star Trek thing made it sound like it was me. I'm doing okay. But special interests can get in the way if they become disruptive and you have no other coping strategies for things. Spending time with your special interest is self-care. So if there's something you're really into, but you don't know if you'd call it a hobby, like I love skincare and dermatology stuff and cosmetic chemistry stuff. It feels weird to call it a hobby, but it is. It's not just taking care of myself. So I would feel bad when I'm like, I've just wasted all of this time watching this video on the 4 types of rosacea and I could have been doing something else. But actually, that's related to my special interests, which is highly regulating for me. And the 20 minutes I took to learn about papulopustular rosacea and treatments for it was good for my brain, which sounds silly, but it was. So I think if you can, when you have some of that alone time, especially if you want to pair it with the first thing I mentioned, spend time doing a hobby you enjoy, like something that is stimmy, that you just really like. Like I know a lot of us like to do things like cross stitch and diamond paint and just do art in general. Take things apart, build stuff like computers, spend time doing those things, and spend time with special interests. So if you want to watch a video about mushrooms or crystals or sharks or any number of the things that our people tend to enjoy, that's helping you. That's helping you stay regulated. And that is embracing part of your autistic identity, which is having special interests. And it's good for you and it's important. And recognizing that and reframing that as part of self-care was really important for me. That is something I wish I would have done earlier on, because I still gave myself a lot of shit about spending time doing things that I found interesting that the holistic world had told me weren't important, and I immediately felt guilt for doing them. So my next tip is something that is more internal work on yourself, and I don't know if it fits under accommodation, but it's very often the first thing I tell clients who are wanting to start unmasking. But this helped me accommodate for myself more. I'm getting ahead of myself. I started asking myself more questions. Very simply put, I started to question myself when I found that my internal monologue was telling me I should do something. I think one concrete example of this is very early after the realization that I was autistic. I was like, oh, fuck, I'm hungry. I need to go eat something. And I thought, I want a smoothie, but I should have something else. Let me do something else. And then for the first time, I actually stopped and go, why should I have something else? Why can't I have a smoothie? And my reasoning was that I had had one earlier and it was lunchtime and it would be weird to have a smoothie for breakfast and for lunch. And then I needed to pick one. And then I was like, well, why? It's like, oh, because in the past, someone had told me it was weird to have smoothies that many times a day, and why didn't I eat some normal food? And I could think of an exact time that happened. And I had changed my behavior for no reason for myself. Having a smoothie for lunch wasn't going to endanger me. I was going to get a bunch of nutritious food that my body needed to keep doing things. So why was I trying to stop myself? And it was because it would not seem normal, and my autistic urge to eat the same thing over and over and over again was being suppressed. It wasn't hurting anybody, and I was changing my behavior for that. So there were many more situations where I would tell myself, I should do this, and then stop and go, okay, why should you do this? And sometimes I had a good reason. Sometimes the reason was the IRS needs this paperwork. I have to go get it. Like, I should do this before I do that. Sometimes telling myself I should do something is true. I should do it. But a lot of the times, I was encountering these internal rules I had made for myself as part of the mask that I had created over 30 years. So I think when you find yourself saying, well, I should eat this, well, I should wear that, well, I should go to this thing, why? Stop to ask yourself why, follow the logic as to why you should, and see if it's sound logic and this thing you should do is in fact something you should do. Or see if it is you saying you should do it because you have some internal rule surrounding that thing that you've created because someone said you were doing something weird. Because when I stopped doing that about food, my life became so much easier. Like, I cannot tell you how much easier it became to feed myself when I stopped trying to feed myself the way that holistic society decides I should. That took so much of my energy, and I had no idea that the way I fed myself 3 times a day was something that was actually harming my autistic brain. So I think just whenever you catch yourself saying, I should do this, just follow that thread and say, why? Why should I do it? Is it a good reason? Or is it because someone made me feel like I had to do something different than what I actually want to do? And for me, that helped me get in touch with things I like and dislike and what feels like comfortable and safe to me. That helped me recalibrate that. And finally, my final recommendation, which I don't want to make it sound like a demand because some of you will immediately be like, fuck you, don't tell me what to do. But please don't feel compelled to figure all of this out at once. If you're a late recognized AuDHD person and you have lived your life up until now thinking you were holistic, you have been operating off of the wrong user's manual for your brain. That is not something you're going to rewrite overnight, and it would be ludicrous to try to undertake rewriting your user's manual as quickly as possible because you don't even know what you can and can't do yet, or should and shouldn't do yet. Yes, you've been autistic your whole life, but you are new to understanding what that means. And these things around your sensory needs and what you like and what you dislike and what feels comfortable, those are things that you should have been allowed to learn earlier in life. You should have been allowed to learn those, and you weren't. And you are having to learn things that a lot of people got to learn as toddlers about themselves and how to regulate their nervous system. And the world, for most people, tries to get us out of that natural behavior that we learn when we're young. But I think when you're autistic, it especially does that. So you are trying to relearn things you should have had the first part of your life to learn, and that's not something that's going to happen quickly. You're going to make really slow progress, and it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and it might get a little messy, but you're doing okay. Take this one step at a time. You're going to be figuring this out for the rest of your life, and that's okay. As life changes, your needs may change. You may need more accommodations. Your support needs, they aren't a static thing, and they're going to change as your physical ability changes, as your brain changes when it's met with aging and trauma and stuff like that. Take it slow. Try one thing at a time. You've got this. You're going to do great. And take it one thing at a time. If there's anything you find that doesn't work for you, you haven't failed. You've just figured out one thing that doesn't work for you. Because the autism spectrum means we are all incredibly different from one another. So just because something works for me or because it worked for another autistic person on the internet doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and that doesn't mean it's hopeless, and that doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. That just means you've learned one thing that isn't for you. So I wish you the best, and again, I will have my notes for this on the Mixed No More Patreon page. And if you're someone who would like some one-on-one support at this point in your journey as a late recognized AuDHDer, please check out the show details because it's literally my job. I get to talk to very cool autistic people all day and help them figure out how to take care of themselves, how to take care of different life stuff that comes their way. I get to be on their team while they help figure out how to organize a neurodivergent family, how to get themselves through a dissertation, how to unmask safely at home while still understanding what they can't unmask at work. All kinds of things. I get to help with so many cool stuff, and if you're someone who needs one-on-one support, yeah, please check out the show details to go see my website because I love my job and I love helping other autistic people. And if you are an AuDHDer in need of one-on-one support, go check it out. It might be a good fit for you. And now I'm really going to throw you off, and I'm going to take care of the housekeeping section that's usually at the very end of the episode, but I'm just going to do it now because it's just me here, and that's what we're going to do. If you want to support Infodumpies and Mixnomer as a whole, which is our production company, make sure you subscribe to Infodumpies on your podcatcher of choice. That helps us move up in the charts and we actually get recommended to more people. And it's a really simple way to help us where you do something once and then you just don't have to think about it. If you haven't rated or reviewed the show, that really helps. If you like the show, please do that. If you don't, please be chill and just please be chill. Like, really. Anyway, if you like the show, please go leave a nice review. That helps us out and lets people know what they're going to get into when they listen to the show. If you want to support us even more, please tell folks about the show. We don't have paid ads and we don't pay for advertising, and we grow entirely by word of mouth. So when you share about the show in your favorite subreddits or Discord servers or wherever you're hanging out on the internet, it helps us a ton. If you're in a place to support us monetarily, make sure you check the link in our show details to the Mixnomer Patreon. At just $1 a month, you get to join our Discord server where we do fun stuff like do streams where we play Jackbox games. And my abs literally hurt the day after our last Jackbox stream. I was laughing so hard, tears were coming down my face. I could not breathe. I was laughing so fucking hard. Everyone in that Discord server is so funny, and playing Jackbox games with them is extremely fun. In the Mixnomer Patreon, you can get bonus material for all the shows, like music from our other show, Today's Lucky Winner, show recording, any notes I make for Infodumpies, any notes Violet makes or a guest may make. And at certain levels, you get a shout out like our friends Randy Lovings, Rachel Rachelson, Sewing Seraph, B. Trossler, Helen Clifford, M. Mosen, Lucy, and Nicole Valdivieso. If you want to see what I'm up to, or Violet is up to, even though she's not in this episode, she's downstairs. She's, I think, doing some stuff in the yard. But if you want to see what Violet is up to, and what I am up to on the internet, please go check out the show details because we have the social media handles of where we hang out on the internet. I am mostly lurking on Instagram where I am either sharing stuff about autism or communism or memes. So if that's up your alley, go follow me on Instagram. I hope you enjoyed this solo dump. I really want to make these more helpful. I really try to do these because I would do my job that I do with coaching and peer support for free if I didn't live under capitalism and have to make money in order to survive. So being able to offer any lived experience or support that I can to help people without charging them while still being able to pay for food is really a line I try to very carefully walk because I know I did not get the help I wanted when I first realized I was autistic, and the world is kind of scary right now, and if anyone can get some help that I can offer while still having to pay for the cost of living, which is the most depressing phrase in the world, I'm going to do it. So I hope these solo dumps are helpful. I hope y'all like them. I'm going to keep making them anyway. But anyway, y'all, we will see you next time with an episode with a guest, which is a very good guest and a fun episode. Clever sign off.